everyone. So some people have asked, and really, literally some people have asked about my background, and I realized I haven't really shared that on this channel, so I thought that might be a fun little casual video to do, and so that's what we're gonna talk about today. Fair warning, this is not a science video. So basically everything that I own that's like memorabilia of my life is contained in these two boxes. Don't worry, we're not gonna go through all of it. Let's do this. And actually, I don't know if you can see this, but see how it's kind of discolored like that? That's because this box was in a fire with a lot of my other belongings, but that's a whole other story. So although I live in the LA area now, I am actually a Midwestern girly. I was born in Wisconsin and I moved to Iowa when I was 7, so I mostly grew up in this little town called Decorah, Iowa. About 8,000 people, but actually like the biggest town for a while, around 3 hours from the nearest major airport. Really grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere. And just briefly about my family, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My dad is a philosophy professor and my mom was an artist / stay-at-home mom. Yeah, I have 3 older brothers and the oldest is my oldest sister. So she moved out when I was like 7, so it was like a lot of boys growing up. And you may know if you've been a Galactite for a while, but I am very tall. I'm 6'4". I'm actually not the tallest person in my family by far. All 3 of my brothers are taller than me. And my parents are both very tall, although not quite as tall as me. When I lived in Wisconsin, I was actually homeschooled just for like 3 years. And then when we moved to Iowa, the schools were better. And so my parents were like, hey, do you want to go to real school? And I was like, yes, I want to go to real school. So I started 3rd grade when I was 7. I was the youngest person in my grade because I was a September baby. So I was like right on the edge and they put me in 3rd instead of 2nd. Yeah. So anyway, this bag has some of my high school stuff. My high school diploma. I was actually a super nerdy kid, which is like 0% surprising, obviously. But I was not the valedictorian. In fact, I wasn't even really all that close to being the valedictorian because I got 3 A-. And yes, I still remember every single one and every single reason. The one that hurts the most was this class we had to take. It was called like Essential Skills. It was taught by the football coach. It was not the most rigorous class in the world. It was in a computer lab. Yeah, I'm old. And it was like modules you had to like kind of work through on your own. And I got in trouble for talking too much. And I finished all of the modules well ahead of time. In fact, I had time to do the extra credit module. And I think all the people sitting around me did too. But anyway, the teacher said that even though I kept up with all my work, I was a distraction to others because I talked too much. And so he gave me an A-. Also, that's 0% a surprising comment. If you know me, I do love to talk. But the funny thing is I'm actually super, super introverted. These 2 things are not mutually exclusive whatsoever. Fun fact. But yes, I did well in high school. I actually got an academic letter. So yeah, you can get non-sports letters, at least in my high school. And this one was for being good at school. And you got a little bar for like every extra time after the first time that you basically earned whatever you had to earn to get this letter, which I don't even remember exactly what it was. And my little National Honor Society pin on there because I was part of the National Honor Society. But oh no, I didn't just have an academic letter. I also had a fine arts letter because your girl was a theater kid. Yeah, I mean, I can't sing this in my life, so I wasn't in that many things, but I loved to act. I loved to be on stage. I did a lot of what was called large group speech and individual speech. And actually, our large group of readers theater, when I was a sophomore, I think, we won the entire state of Iowa Best Readers Theater. It was a big deal. Anyway, so this is my letter for being in speech and drama, and then I actually lettered all 4 years in speech and drama, so that's what these stars are. And then I also earned a letter in orchestra because I played the violin. I went to this honors orchestra. I wasn't like particularly good at the violin, but I was like just good enough to do okay. 1 year I got to be first chair, second violin, but like not because I was all that good. And in fact, the one time there was a second violin solo, they gave it to one of the first violinists, so. I was a National Merit Scholar. We had to take, what did they call those? Not the LSATs. The PSATs? The PSATs. They were like made up SATs. And this, my crowning achievement of high school is I did get the highest score on the PSATs in my high school. I remember that. Wow, this is sounding very braggadocious. Sorry. This is actually pre-high school, but this is my math counts medal because I was a mathlete. I haven't looked at this stuff in ages, by the way. Here's one from All-State for speech. I actually made it to All-State all 4 years, even as a freshman, which was hard to do. All right, believe me, this was a big deal at the time. Oh my God, Future Problem Solvers. I forgot about Future Problem Solvers. Okay, so this was a program I did that was like one of the gifted and talented programs. It was called Future Problem Solvers, FPS. They had already had the group set up, so they brought me in and had me do the individual component. And I actually really liked it. You had to do these things where you were like writing scenarios like all by yourself. And like I said, introvert, so that really appealed to me. Anyway, oh, here's some more All-State medals because I actually made it to All-State in multiple events. This was not intending to just be about all my achievements in life. In high school, right? Really peaked in high school here. And here's my little high school graduation tassel We were red and blue. Those were our colors. We were the Vikings, the decor Vikings. My town is like very Norwegian American in history. Not me. Yeah, so the Vikings. And there's a little class of 2000. I'm old. So in addition to the stuff that I was actually good at, which was academics, speech, and math team, I also did a year of golf. Mostly because I wanted to learn how to golf. Very bad at it, but I actually really love golf. I watch golf all the time. I was in cross country for a year. I was the slowest person on the team, but I really enjoyed the team. But then that was my freshman year, and I was thinking about coming back sophomore year, and then I remembered how much I hated all the running, and so I quit. Well, not quit. I guess I just didn't join sophomore year. I did 2 years of soccer, which I was like medium bad at. Like, I wasn't the worst person on the team. Notice I didn't include basketball on that list, even though, I'm a freak of nature. I played basketball in middle school, and I was so bad at it, y'all. I mean, we had A, B, and C squads, and I was on the C squad. I didn't even start on the C squad. I scored 10 points the entire, 8th grade, 6th grade season. I don't even know. Anyway, it wasn't my thing. Let's see if we can find a picture. Little baby Nora. Remember Phil? The joy of going and getting your disposable camera developed. This is what passes a selfie back in the day. Taking a picture in the mirror with my disposable camera. Here we go. Here's one of it. With a SpongeBob SquarePants balloon. I have never even seen that show. I had braces. That's enough of that. Okay, so there I was, 17 years old, about to graduate high school, super nerdy kid. I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I changed my mind a million times. I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I kind of knew that was impractical to plan on that as my life's work. And so I had this weird vision of myself as a politician, which is such a bad idea. No, absolutely not. But whatever, I was 17, I didn't know any better. And that was kind of in my mind. And I also got really into the military at the time. And I don't know why. I was no one in my family was really from a military background. My uncle, but he had passed away. So it was just not that much of a thing. So I remember telling my parents that I wanted to join the military. And my mom was shocked, jaw on the floor. She was like, you hate it when people tell you what to do, which is absolutely true. But there's a big difference between someone giving you an order and then you go carrying it out, and you're already doing something and your mom comes and tells you to do the thing you're already doing and you just can't handle that. That was me. So that was my plan. I was going to join the Navy. I was super into languages. I took Spanish all 4 years in high school and really loved it. And so I was gonna join the Navy and try and learn a bunch of languages and maybe be a translator or whatever. I just figured, I would do that for a while and then I could go to college after. It would help get my college paid for. So yeah, that was my plan. But my dad actually, who is such a hippie, by the way, like I said, philosophy professor, long hair, ponytail, but he actually was kind of into the whole military thing, and I did not know this. And he was like, you should be an officer. And I was like, I don't want to be an officer. I don't like telling people what to do, which is true. And he's like, well, he's you might like it better, this and this and this. So long story short, I ended up interviewing for a ROTC scholarship, which I did get. And then I kind of had this whole plan of I was going to do NROTC at Boston University. I was literally on the Boston University website, picking out dorms. I had been accepted to the university. And there was an issue with my NROTC paperwork. And so oh, we can't let you into the unit. You'll be put on this wait list. And I was this was spring of my senior year of high school. And I was what the fuck am I going to do with my life? And rewinding a little bit, when I decided I was going to try and do ROTC, there was another guy that I was friends with, and he was also really into the military thing, and he was going to be an officer and looking at all these different routes, and he was really interested in the service academies, which I did not even know existed until the fall of my senior year of high school. And he was kind of giving me shit, good-natured shit about doing ROTC when he was going to go to a service academy. And I was I could get into a service academy too, because I'm a little competitive. And so I went through the whole process of applying to the Naval Academy, and I somehow got in. I still to this day do not understand that. But I wasn't going to go. Like I said, I was going to go to Boston University and do ROTC there. But once this whole paperwork snafu happened, my dad, who was really into the idea of the academy, was go to the academy. And my biggest hurdle with this is that I am not a particularly physically fit person. I mean, I am, and especially now, much more now than I was at the time. But even though I like to work out, I'm not particularly fast. I'm not particularly strong. I could not do a single push-up at the time. And I was Dad, I cannot go to the Naval Academy because they have higher physical standards there, among many other things. And he was okay, I will, if you decide you want to go. He wasn't pressuring me to do this. I want to make that clear. He was just trying to be supportive. But he was if you want to go to the academy, I will hire a personal trainer for you. So I did it. And I remember dropping the letter that like my acceptance, I signed everything, dropping it in the mailbox with my dad at the post office. And he turned to me and he was like, never again volunteer yourself. Like, you're going to remember that. And I was like, oh, okay, I just won't volunteer myself. And he's like, what do you think you just did? And I was like, oh, that's what that means. Anyway, so yeah, about a month after I graduated high school, I showed up in Annapolis. I had never been to the Naval Academy, had never been to Annapolis. My parents drove me out there from Iowa. It was a long drive. And I showed up the day beforehand. And so I got to like walk around Annapolis and like terrify myself about what I was getting into. And I started the Naval Academy. So one of the things at the Naval Academy, on your very first day, they gave you this book. It is called Reef Points, and you are expected to memorize pretty much everything in here. And this was like the only thing I was good at my entire academy career. In fact, I was so good at memorizing them. It's called your rates. So I was so good at memorizing my rates that I actually got in trouble for it because one of the squad leaders told me that I was making everybody else look bad because I could memorize so much stuff. That was a weird moment for me. I did super struggle with the fitness. They like broke us up into groups by like how fast we could run. I was in the slowest group. I think I did like 2 push-ups on the first day. Like they like had us do a baseline test and I did so bad on it. And I was like so sure I was going to flunk out. But I actually never failed an official fitness test the entire time I was at the academy. And I came real close. So we had to run a mile and a half and we had to do it in 12 minutes, 40 seconds. That was failing. And the slowest one I ever ran was 12 minutes and 36 seconds. Usually I was closer to 12 minutes. So yeah, I have a bunch of like random Navy stuff. Oh man. Oh man, oh man, oh man. I love that I still have these. Ooh, okay. This is weird because I got eye surgery, so I don't actually need these glasses anymore, so it looks very trippy, but called these BCGs, birth control glasses. Ooh. I don't know why I kept these. I'm glad I did. Got messes of shoulder boards in here from my time. Here we go. Here's a name tag. Anyway, okay, now we're starting to get into the science of it all. But yeah, going back to my point about kind of having this idea of myself being a politician and, you know, the academy being a good route to do that. So my plan was to major in political science because I was actually more of an English person than I was a math person, although I liked both of them. But we had like a set thing of courses we had to take freshman year, and so we didn't have to declare a major until the end of freshman year. And so when it came time, we were getting ready to declare majors, like different, you know, majors had like open houses and stuff. And I thought, you know, I'll go to the physics open house just to see because I did take AP physics in high school. And I went and they had an astro track within the physics department, which I thought was so cool because I was like, I mean, who doesn't like space? Like I had like on my bulletin board in my room in Bancroft, I had like a little postcard of the Hubble. I don't even know where I got that from, but whatever. I just liked that kind of stuff. But like I was never like a super like into space person. I never went to telescope. I never went to space camp. Like I said, I'm from Iowa. Like it's very far away from anything related to that. But I just thought it was so cool. And, you know, I was like, it doesn't really matter what I choose to major in because when I graduate, I'm going to be an officer in the Navy. It's not like, you know, I need a certain major to get a certain job. So I decided to major in physics. It was, I mean, I'm making this sound kind of impulsive, but I think it kind of was. And it's funny because it, I guess, really dictated a lot of my future of my life. Something that's super funny is that summer I was back visiting my hometown and I ran into my AP physics teacher, you know, kind of downtown, small town. And I was like, oh, Mr. Hayes, like, guess what? I'm majoring in physics. And like the look he gave me and he was like, you hated my class. You complained about it every day. And I was like, yeah, that was actually true. He had a fair point. What can I say? And while I certainly had my moments of being like, what have I done to myself? I really enjoyed my major very much. Like I said, I did the astro track of the physics major, so I got to take astronomy, astrophysics, observational astrophysics, probably other ones that I'm forgetting. But yeah, so that was fun. And I got to do like research, but it wasn't like what I would now think of as research. It was more like, you know, tracking asteroids via DS9 from observations that some of our professors had taken. But it was still pretty cool. I was actually the president of the astronomy club for 2 years. And yeah, I just thought it was really cool. And one of the things that I thought was like the most cool was exoplanets. Which at the time, keep in mind, this was like pre-Kepler. We talked about exoplanets for like 1 day in my astrophysics class. We only knew of a couple hundred of them. Like it was just not a huge topic, but I was like, that's so cool. And I always had like in the back of my head, like this idea of like, if I ever went on to grad school, like I would want to study exoplanets, even though I knew I wasn't going to go on to grad school because I was going to go be in the Navy. But I did really enjoy physics. I did really well at it. This is like some honor society pin thing I got. Sigma Pi Sigma. But yeah, so I had a lot of fun doing it and it was something I found challenging, but fun. I'm being very repetitive. Anyway, I also minored in Spanish because like I said, I love learning languages and I loved learning Spanish in high school, so I wanted to continue on with it. I got to do like a study abroad program just for a month in the summer. I think that was before my junior year. That was so much fun. Absolutely loved that. And then, you know, well, you might not know, But at the academy, there's kind of multiple options of what you are going to do once you graduate. And this is called service selection because you have to choose which thing you're going to do. And the Naval Academy graduates officers into both the Navy and the Marine Corps. So you have to choose if you want to be in the Navy or Marine Corps, you have to choose kind of what specialty you want to do, and you have to get selected with that because they have to match up like numbers and everything, right? The Navy needs of the Navy, as they say. So like the Navy needs certain things, you want certain things. They do a lot of matching to make sure that this all lines up. Sorry if you can hear my bunny throwing around his toys. Now, like I said, I was from Iowa. I really knew so little about the Naval Academy and even the Navy in general when I went out and joined, including the fact that I had never seen Top Gun, which was like horrifying to my classmates because so many of them are like, I came here because of that movie. I don't even think I knew that the Navy had pilots until I got to the academy. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. And like, not everyone, but so many people wanted to be pilots. It was like, and I was like, I'm just here to drive ships. Like, it's the Navy, right? Like, I just want to go out to sea because I've always loved the ocean, which is one of the reasons I wanted to join the Navy. So yeah, I was just kind of had in mind, like, I wasn't going to be a pilot. I wasn't obviously going to be a SEAL or a Marine. Like I said, physical fitness was not my strength. I actually, going back to this whole point, so we had to take this physical test every semester, and it was like the bane of my existence. I worked so hard just to even pass it. And we got graded on it based on how well we did. And so I got like a C or like a D, like pretty much every time. And I was getting like 4.0s in most of my classes. I had like, I think 2 semesters where I didn't get a 4.0. But I was never on any of the like Dean's List, Superintendent's List, none of that, because my stupid military grade was really low because of my PRT. Anyway, not still bitter about that. No, I'm not. It's fine. This was a long time ago. But anyway, so yeah, I was going to go be on a ship because that to me was what the Navy was all about. But while I was at the academy, I definitely learned that this was like not a popular option. Like, people did not like SWO. SWO was kind of what you got forced to do if you didn't get like your other more better selections. So that was like weird to me, but I was like, I still want to be a SWO. That's why I'm here. But I did find out that you can be a nuclear surface warfare officer. So the Navy has nuclear powered ships. Most of these are submarines, but also the aircraft carriers. So they need people who are trained on nuclear reactor and nuclear science to be able to operate the reactors on these ships. And this was also something that people really did not like the idea of. People told me that it was a terrible idea because you would get like a little bit of a bonus if you signed on to the nuke community. And people were like, don't do it. It's not worth the money. Like, you have to go to nuke school. You have to memorize like books and books and books of stuff. You have to like learn all of this crap about physics and thermodynamics and like blah, 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 blah. And I was like, that actually sounds good to me. Like, you're selling me on this, really. Like, I'm good at memorizing things and I like science. And I think it sounds fun to go to an extra year of school to learn about how to operate a nuclear reactor. So yeah, so I decided to be a nuke SWO. I was actually an early selection for nuke SWO. So normally you would find out your service selection in the spring and they had this whole process. But if you knew you wanted to be a nuke, you could kind of go in for the early selection because part of being a nuke is you had to be selected to be a nuke. So you had to go down to Washington, D.C. and you had to interview with like all the people at naval reactors. And I remember going down there and I felt like my interview didn't go that well because at one point I was like solving like a differential equation or something on like the whiteboard and the interviewer fell asleep. And I was like, oh God, I'm so bad at this. But I did, in fact, get selected to be a nuke SWO. And in fact, at the time, it was not even possible for me to select submarines. They were still men only at that point in time. That actually changed the year after I graduated. But I wouldn't want to be on a submarine anyway. So yeah, I graduated from the Naval Academy. And my graduation was actually when President Obama was president, and he came and he was our speaker, and I got to shake his hand and I, exchanged sentences with him. I have absolutely no memory of what they were. Done it all. I do have a picture of it though. So yes, so this is not only my diploma over here, which says that I got a Bachelor of Science in Physics with merit, because I'm a nerd, but also my commission into the Navy as an ensign. Okay, so after graduating, I was commissioned as an ensign in the Navy and I had to report to my first duty station. So as a nuke SWO, the way it works is that you go and you do a tour of duty on a conventional non-nuclear ship. And you get qualified as a surface warfare officer. You basically learn how to drive the ship, learn how to be an officer. You have a division, you manage all these people. So anyway, to figure out what ship you're going to go on, they have this big ship selection night of all the SWOs, and they have this big board that has all the ships that need new ensigns on it. And based on your class order, like the ranking in your order of merit, you get to go up to the board and you just pick a ship and like that's where you're going. And yeah, so I knew that I wanted to go to San Diego because I had been to San Diego for some training and I absolutely loved it. So I was like, San Diego, I had my heart set on it. I also had this idea that I wanted to be on an amphib instead of a crew does. So The Amphib Navy it's just a different vibe. At least the stereotype is that crew des is like a little bit more like go, 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 and Amphib's like a little bit more laid back. And also sometimes Amphibs do like humanitarian work, which I thought would be really cool. And yeah, so that was what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be on kind of a relatively new ship because I had this very mistaken idea that it would be like better and need less maintenance and stuff. So I selected it for my very first ship, the USS Green Bay, which had just been commissioned 6 months earlier and was the newest LPD in the Navy, which is the landing platform dock. It looks like this. If you've ever seen pictures of it, the one with like super weird masts, that's like radar stuff. And it was stationed in San Diego. So I went out there, little Ensign Bailey. And when I reported, I became the fire control officer. And yeah, so the fire control officer is not in charge of fires, nothing to do with fires. It's like weapons. And on an amphib, you don't have that many weapons because like I said, you're not like, it's not the mission of amphibs. So they're mostly just like self-defense weapons. So we had like a missile launcher and I was in charge of some of the radars. And after I was the FCO for like a year, I got moved to being the SICO, which is the Combat Information Center officer. Yeah, and I kind of discovered why people were so down on SWOs. There's a saying in the Navy that SWOs eat their young, and it's like it can be a very cutthroat community, and there's like a very kind of sense of like competitiveness and like, I got the least amount of sleep last night, or like, I don't know. There was things about it I did not enjoy. It turns out I really do not like standing watch. The entire concept of it you get so bored. I would get so bored, and my feet would hurt so bad because you just have to stand on the bridge. You're not allowed to sit. But I did like driving the ship. I did love being out to sea. Like that part I did really love. And so when you're an officer on watch on the bridge, you usually have a pair of binoculars. And I would sometimes go out to the bridge wing when like nothing was happening and it was like safe and stuff. Also, there's many officers on watch, so it wasn't like I was the only person up there. But sometimes I'd sneak out to the bridge wing and I'd use binoculars and look at the stars because like you have never seen a beautiful night sky until you've seen the sky in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with absolutely no one around. So gorgeous. But yeah, I did not particularly enjoy my first ship. Nothing against anyone there. It was just like, I kind of was like, no, this isn't what I want to do. I was also, at the time I got married, like, I don't know, 6 months into my tour, and like we split up by the end of it. So like personal life was like a little bit in shambles. And I was just really struggling with like going out to sea for 2 weeks at a time and being on duty every 3 days. And like, it was hard for me. So because the ship was so new, it was like not, like qualified to go on a deployment. So most of what I was doing the entire time I was there was like maintenance, training, and qualifications. So I actually didn't go on a deployment with that ship. I was on it for almost 2 years, and I left literally 2 weeks into the first deployment. So like we left San Diego, we were going on deployment, and I flew out of Hawaii to leave and go to nuke school. So I went over to Charleston, South Carolina, which is where the nuke school is at. Nuke school is like for the officers, it's like a 6-month program. You get to study thermodynamics, physics, nuclear, theory, lots of stuff. And it was like constant tests. Like we had these tests all the time and we had to pass them. And one of the things about these tests is like, you really had to be like verbatim. Like you had to memorize so much stuff, but I'm pretty good at memorizing things. So I actually found nuke school to be kind of fun. I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it. It was one of the better times that I had in the Navy, in fact. I think I ended up being the like number 2 person in my class from nuke school. So that was kind of fun. And then after nuke school, we have to go to what's called prototype. So prototype is basically like the hands-on version of nuke school. So there's like this actual operating reactor that you train on and you learn how to do everything on the reactor and you have to do all these qualification stuff. It's also 6 months. There's actually 2 of them. There's one in New York and one in Charleston, but I wanted to stay in Charleston because I had just started dating someone that lived there. So I stayed in Charleston. And did my prototype there. Prototype was a little bit less fun because it's shift work. So there was like 3 shifts and you kind of rotated between them. So you had to do days, mids, swings. I even forget what they're called, but yeah, that part was not so great. Definitely didn't like it as much as nuke school. But then once you are, finally done with prototype, you get to choose which ship you want to go to. And again, this is the same sort of thing as I was talking about before with service selection, right? There's needs of the Navy. So there are certain carriers that need a certain number of officers and, people want to go certain places and then just try and match all this up. But one of the things was that if you were like the top person in your class, you got your first pick. Guaranteed you would get your first pick. So that was my motivation. I did end up being the first person in my class at prototype, so I was able to choose exactly which carrier I wanted. I knew I wanted to go back to San Diego, so I picked the Carl Vinson. So I actually also had really weird timing with the Vinson. So I joined them right when they got back from a deployment, and it was their second deployment in like a year and a half or something. Like they went on pretty much back-to-back deployments. So they had a really long maintenance period coming up. So I also did not deploy with the Vinson. I never went on actual real deployment in my 5 years in the Navy. I did, since I needed to train on an actual operating nuclear reactor, and ours was not operating because we were in maintenance. So I did get sent to a different ship for like 4 months when they were on deployment. I went to the Stennis, so I got to spend 4 months on deployment with the Stennis. But it wasn't quite the same because like I didn't have a division while I was there. I was like just there to qualify, so my entire job was just to like do all the stuff I needed to do. I had like a lot of free time, which is like kind of unusual. That was fun though. I got to go to Malaysia and Thailand when I was with the Stennis. So yeah, I actually really kind of enjoyed being a nuke SWO, like the nuke side of things. Like obviously there were still things I like were like difficult on a carrier because yeah, the same thing of going underway and duty, and it's just not super fun all the time. But I did like I loved being down in the reactor. I really liked all that stuff. I remember at the time they were like working on this new class of carrier, the Ford class of carrier, and like we got to like go talk to someone that was like involved with it. I just remember being blown away about how cool all the technology was, and I was like a little sad that I was like leaving and I wasn't ever going to get a chance to like serve on a Ford class carrier. But anyway, I did decide to leave, and that was actually largely driven by the fact that for nuke SWO you alternate between doing conventional tours and nuke tours. So after my tour on the carrier, I would have gone to shore duty, and then I would have had to go back to a conventional ship, like my first ship, and be a department head. And I did not want to do that at all. So yeah, I decided to leave. And the reason I didn't even stay for my shore duty, which most people, like a lot of times they stay for the shore duty because shore duty is like much more chill than sea duty, but they actually changed the requirements. So when I first signed up to be a nuke SWO, the requirement was that your second tour was 24 months long, and then you would get sent to shore duty. But while I was there, they changed it to, I think, 27 months. And what that meant was that if I was getting out of the Navy, I could leave after 24 months on my sea tour because that was my minimum service requirement when I signed all the paperwork. But if I was going to stay in the Navy, since they had changed the requirements to 27 months, I would have had to stay an extra 3 months on my carrier at sea duty before I could go to shore duty. And since I knew I didn't want to like stay in the Navy, I was like 3 extra months at sea just to postpone like me having to go out to the real world and get a job and like all that stuff. I was just like, I just want to cut my losses and go. Also in like hindsight, being like, okay, I just wanted to do the nuke stuff. There is like kind of a path that you can do that, but I would have had to like, you know, apply for it because I was like from the academy, you have to select what's called unrestricted line. This is way too much detail, but anyway, I didn't really think about it at the time to switch over to like the EDO community. So anyway, I bounced. Now at that point, I was living in San Diego and I wanted to stay in San Diego and love San Diego. And there's not like, what's the word I want? Industries. There's not like a ton of industries in San Diego. Actually, when I was like planning to get out, I started taking my actuary tests. I passed the first 2 actuarial tests because I was like, being an actuary kind of seems like it would be up my tree. Like I like math. I don't know. It just seemed cool. But basically there was like no path to becoming an actuary and staying in San Diego. So I decided not to do that after taking those first 2 tests. I was looking for all these jobs. It was like kind of hard because like, yeah, I had, been in the Navy since I was 17. So I didn't really like know that much. And it was difficult to like be like, yeah, like I'm kind of technical, but kind of not. Anyway, I ended up kind of by chance getting this job at a defense contractor because that is a big industry in San Diego. That makes sense. So I ended up working still with the Navy, but on the civilian side as a contractor. And I worked at SPAWAR and I was working on team there that was like on the satellite communications. And I wasn't loving it. I think my biggest issue was I was bored. I was so bored. And I kept daydreaming about going back to grad school. I went to like some course or something where you're supposed to like write like a vision statement of your life. And I was like, I wrote like a vision statement. I was like, I'm, 40. I have my PhD from MIT in exoplanetary science and like blah, blah. But there was a few things stopping me from like going back to grad school. The biggest one being my boyfriend at the time. I just didn't, like, he was still in the Navy. He was a submariner, and I didn't want to like leave him for 5 years to go to grad school. And yeah, so that was a big one for me. And then also I was just like, it had been so long since I graduated undergrad, and like I had never really planned to go to grad school, so I didn't have like research experience. I was like, who would write me a letter of recommendation? And it's been years and years since I've been in school. So I basically kept talking myself out of it. My boyfriend at the time, he was stationed in San Diego. He got stationed back in Charleston, so we moved there. I remember thinking, I was like, if we ever broke up, I would apply to grad school. And then I thought, like, I can't put my life on hold for this man. I loved him very much, but like, I have dreams of my own or whatever. And so we talked a lot about it, and we decided, I could kind of I could. He didn't give me permission, but that like together we would work through that. It was like kind of like a boiling a frog, right? It was like step by step, because I was like, well, I can't go to grad school because like it's been so long since I took any like actual physics courses. I don't really remember a lot of it. And then I was like, well, I could just learn. I still have my textbooks. So I started going through my textbooks from undergrad. Yeah, just studying them basically and like reteaching myself all this stuff that I used to know and I had kind of forgotten. And then I was like, well, I'm not gonna be able to take the physics GRE because like it's just been too long. But I was like, well, I can just study for it. So I got like a physics GRE study book and I started working through it. And I was like, I was really enjoying it. I had so much fun doing that. I took like a practice physics GRE to like start with to give myself a baseline, and I did so bad on it, like absolutely horrible. And like I was like, I'm never gonna be able to do this, but you know, I'll just study it. So I spent a while studying, and then I was like I said, I was really like, this big barrier for me was like getting a letter of recommendation. So I was like, I feel so self-conscious about it. Like, who am I going to ask? Like, but finally I was like, you know what? I just asked someone. Like, I'll just email my professor from undergrad. Maybe they'll do it for me. So I emailed two of my professors and was like, can you write me a letter of recommendation? I was in your class like 8 years ago. They were super happy to do it. They were super nice about it. I was like, I should not have been so freaked out about it. And then I decided for my third letter to get someone from the Navy to write me a letter so that it would like kind of fill in the gaps of like what I had been doing in the last 8 years. And I got one of my bosses when I was a nuke so that, you know, they could talk more about like the technical side of things. So that it wasn't like just, oh, she was driving ships for 5 years. Like, I did do technical stuff. I went to a nuke school. Like, I did all this stuff. So then I thought, okay, I'll just take the GRE. So I took the GRE, and then I thought, okay, I'll just take the physics GRE. So I took the physics GRE. You know, I thought, okay, I'll just apply to a few places. And so I started applying to places, and I thought, I'm not going to get it anywhere. And I had this strategy that I was like, I'm only going to apply to places that I would be like 100% stoked to go. No safety schools, nothing like that, because I still wasn't even sure I wanted to do this. So I was like, there's no point in like applying to a place you're not excited about going, because like you still don't even know if you want to do this. And so then we had moved to Charleston by that point. I was still working for the same company. They had like a branch in Charleston, so I switched to working with them. And I started getting into places. I like could not believe it. In fact, I still can't believe it. It was crazy. I think I applied to 7 schools and I got into 3 of them. Those were Hawaii, MIT, and University of Chicago. So Hawaii was out of the running like pretty early on, because partly because I couldn't afford to go to the open house. And also like, you know, in the offer letter, they kind of tell you a little bit about the stipend, and it was the lowest of all 3 of them and like the highest cost of living. And I was like, how am I going to make that work? But it was also hard because Hawaii has a submarine base. And so there was like a good chance that my boyfriend at the time could have gotten stationed there and we could have actually like been in the same place for a while. But then he told me he didn't even want to be stationed in Hawaii. So I was like, okay, well, Hawaii's right out. Which in hindsight, again, was like a super good decision, because Hawaii is very observationally focused. And I'm not an observational scientist, but I didn't know that at the time. So anyway, so it was down to MIT and UChicago. And I, again, at this point, I'm still not even sure I'm going to do it. And so I was like, I'm just going to go to the open houses and see. I went to the open houses. And I remember actually like the Chicago open house was way less fun. Like the MIT one, like MIT's a much bigger department. So MIT doesn't have like a specific astro department. It's a physics department. So it's a lot bigger. And there was just a lot of people. I think there was like a party that I went to. Like it was a lot more fun. There was like, just with more people, I think it's easier to find people that you're going to like mesh with. Whereas Chicago, we did also kind of have a party, but like it was, I don't know, it was a small group of people, and I was like way older than everybody, because most people go to grad school, at least in physics, right after undergrad. And keep in mind, I was 29 at this point. So, but I just felt better about Chicago in a way. Like I think the actual department at Chicago really facilitated a lot more. So like they set up a whole schedule of meetings with me so I could meet with all these different professors, because like I didn't know who all these professors were. I didn't even know what they studied. Like I knew I wanted to do exoplanets, but I had no idea if I wanted to do like observational, theoretical, instrumentation. I didn't even know that instrumentation was like a whole subfield until I started going to these open houses. And I was like, isn't this just engineering? And then everyone got mad at me. And I was like, oh, okay, so I have learned. But yeah, so Chicago just kind of set all that up, and it just was like really, I don't know, it was just really easy to work with them. And MIT, don't get me wrong, I loved everyone that I met at MIT, but it was a lot more like, go find the people you want to talk to. And I was like, I'm a very introverted person. Like, I just didn't feel super comfortable like doing that. And so I feel like I didn't talk to as many people. And I like, big factor for me was that like I said, I knew I wanted to study exoplanets. At the time, UChicago had 3 professors in the astro department that studied exoplanets, as well as some people in the geophysics department that had some overlap with exoplanets. Whereas MIT only had 1. I met so many other people at the open house that were also interested in exoplanets. So I was like, if all of these people come here and everyone wants to work with Sarah, she also had 3 different departments that she took grad students from. So I was like, what are the odds that she would even take me on as a student? And then there's like no other options, basically. And I remember like talking to them about this when I was there. One thing, they were trying to hire another exoplanets professor, but he hadn't accepted the offer yet. And they were like, oh, you can find an advisor at like Harvard. Like we do, they're like, people do cross like things all the time. And I was like, well, if I wanted to go to Harvard, I would apply to Harvard. Like, I'm going to MIT. And then the other like big consideration for me was going back to this point about Chicago being an astro department and MIT being a physics department. So at MIT, I would have had to do a lot more physics, whereas all the required courses and all the stuff at Chicago was just astro. And at that point in time, I was like not necessarily jazzed about, you know, doing like quantum physics or whatever, because it had been so long since I'd done undergrad and I was like a little worried about it. But I was very, very torn about this decision. And it was kind of funny because I remember like posting about it on Facebook back in the day. And it was one of those things where like everyone that like wasn't like a physicist, which is most people I know, were like, go to MIT. Like, how is this a question? Like, why would you ever choose anywhere besides MIT if you get into MIT? But if you're in the physics field or the astronomy field, you know that UChicago is a very prestigious and huge place in the field. So like, I felt like, you know, sure, maybe the like name recognition outside of the field is better for MIT, but like UChicago, like I'm still floored that I ever got into UChicago. Like, but I was so torn. I had a spreadsheet because I love spreadsheets. And I remember I made the spreadsheet. I like thought of like every single category I could think of that I would like care about, including things like number of days of sunshine in a year. Because keep in mind, I've been living in San Diego and Charleston for the last 8 years, and I do not like winter. So like even either one of these schools was going to be a real winter shock for me. But so like number of days of sunshine, like the average like cold temperature or the average high temperature. But then also things like, you know, the stipend, the cost of living. Like I did fake budgets of like how much money would I have left over, because like at this point in my life, I was not looking to live with roommates or anything like that. And yeah, just like a million like criteria that I could think of. And they were all things that I could give like a number to. And I did it blind. So I went through and I like evaluated everything for UChicago. I went through and evaluated everything for MIT without looking at like total of all these things I had. And then I got to the end to like unveil this number that was going to help me make a decision. And they were the exact same. And there was a lot of things on this list. I was like, what are the odds of that? So in the end, it came down to a gut decision and, you know, all the factors I talked about before. And a very important one was going back to this idea about the budget, is that Chicago had a much, much, much more affordable cost of living, and I think even a slightly higher stipend, because they were also offering me a little bit of a scholarship. So I was like, I'm going to be able to live just a lot better in Chicago. And I'm like a pretty like frugal person. I'd already been saving a lot of money for retirement. So I was like, okay, at least if I go to Chicago, I won't be like having to pull money out of my savings. I won't necessarily be able to put money in because like, you know, I wasn't getting paid a ton, but like it was going to like break even financially. And I actually did end up being able to put some money away when I was at grad school. But yeah, so I decided to go. And it was like every step of the way, I was like giving myself an out of being like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I decided to do it. So I packed up everything I owned. I drove from Charleston to Chicago with a U-Haul truck. I had bought a condo in Chicago so that I had somewhere to live when I got there. I was actually still dating the same guy at the time, although we ended up breaking up by Christmas of that year. But yeah, no hate to him. It had run its course. And yeah, and I started my PhD program. And like I said, I did not know. I knew I wanted to do exoplanets. I did not know if I wanted to do theory, observation, instrumentation. I really knew very, very little about doing actual research, and I was so nervous about it. I had quit my job in May, and I wasn't starting until September. So I had the whole summer where I was like studying more physics, and I taught myself to code Python because I knew that was going to be a big deal, because I did not know how to do Python at all. I worked through like a Python for Physics, like free textbook, and, you know, was certainly not very good at it by any means, but like good enough, I felt like. And I actually ended up taking my very first quarter. So Chicago had a quarter system, but the very first quarter, they offered a class called computational astrophysics. And it was basically, like Python for astrophysics. And I was like, I need to take this class. It was the hardest class I took in all of grad school. And so taking it my very first quarter, I was crying in the bathroom like so many days. I was like, hours and hours on this homework, like just so bad. And like now, I think I found some of my like old notebooks, like Jupyter notebooks from it. And I was like, this code is so bad. Like my poor professor was probably like, what the fuck is wrong with this girl? Anyway, so I started working with one of the professors that had actually like kind of just been assigned to me. They're like, we want you to have an advisor right away. So like you'll start with him, but like you can move to anybody else like at any time. Like it's not like you have to stay with him, but just so that you can get the ball rolling on getting research started, because the program at Chicago is very, very research focused. So I started working with him. I was like, I don't know what's going on. He was like, go learn how to use this like N-body simulator thing, and like you can do some stuff with it. And I was like, okay. So I learned how to do that, and I started doing some stuff, and we did like a whole project, and I was working on the paper. But then I was like, there was also someone else I wanted to work with in like a very different, like more in like planetary interiors and like what planets are like, rather than the first guy that I was working with, which was like orbital dynamics. So I went and did that for like a quarter over the summer, and that was great. I really liked working with her, but I was like, no, I know what I want to do. Like I want to do orbital dynamics. And it's so funny because in hindsight, I always would like, that was definitely what I wanted to do. I literally, before I even went to grad school, I have a book on celestial mechanics that was like on my nightstand. Like duh, Nora. Like, and lab was my least favorite part of class when I was a physics major in undergrad. My whole goal with lab was to race through it as soon as possible so I could leave. I hated lab, whereas I liked doing problem sets. I liked when I had 3 pages of math and I got to an answer at the end and I felt like it all worked out and it was like so elegant. Like, I was always destined to be a theorist and like a planetary dynamicist, but I didn't know it at the time. It took me a little while to figure this out. So anyway, so I went back and started working with him on a new project and then eventually asked him to be my thesis advisor. Had to pass candidacy. So there's 2 parts to candidacy at Chicago and they are both research focused. And this was also a big difference versus MIT, by the way, because MIT I think had like written tests that were very rigorous from what I heard, whereas Chicago was like, I had to give a talk on my research that I was doing for the first part and then, and then answer questions. So it was like an oral, interview. And then the second part, I had to write like a paper based on my research and then also do this like oral interview. So I passed both of those, which means I got advanced to candidacy. So it took 2 years to do that. And then after that, I was done with classes and everything. I was done with required classes. I still was like taking random classes here and there, including some Spanish classes, because like, why not? And I ended up doing, I think, 4 first author papers during my time in grad school. And so when I was coming up on like 5 years, I kind of was ready to be done and decided to just staple 3 of those papers together and make them into a thesis, which I defended in April of 2022, I think. You can also watch my defense if you want, because it was in the era of Zoom. And then I graduated with my PhD, which was very exciting. I have it somewhere. Oh, here it is. So pretty. So here's my PhD, in case, I don't know, you thought I was lying about this. And at the time, I did not have a job lined up. So I hadn't applied to postdocs for a couple reasons. So for one thing, I absolutely loved grad school. It was, I mean, obviously there was like difficult moments, but I really enjoyed doing research. I really enjoyed my work. Like if I could have basically just done grad school for like the rest of my career, I probably would have done it. But that's not how academia works. And so, I looked at my advisor and I looked at the professors and I looked at what they were doing and I was like, I don't really want to do that because they were doing a lot of managing postdocs and students and a lot of grant writing and like not a lot of like sitting in their office writing code and like studying the universe. I guess. And so I kind of thought, this doesn't really look like necessarily the endpoint that I want to arrive at. Also, it is like so competitive and so cutthroat. So not being like super excited about the endpoint, like how was I going to like battle it out with people whose like whole like dream in life was to be a professor? But I probably would have liked doing a postdoc because I think a postdoc generally probably would have been just like a continuation of grad school, except now people call me doctor. But since I knew that I didn't really want to be a professor, it kind of seemed like doing a postdoc. This is kind of the same thing with the Navy. It was just postponing the inevitable where I was going to have to leave academia and figure out what I was doing with my life. And also just the process of applying for postdocs is really intensive. And so it was a lot of work to put myself through for something that I was like only going to do for maybe, 2 years or whatever. And this is like kind of embarrassing to admit, but so for postdocs, you have to get letters of recommendation. And you generally need 3. And I really only had about 2 people I felt comfortable asking to write me letters of recommendation. And like little introverted me was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to like have to ask a third person to do this for me. Even though I know there were some people that would have been happy to do it, but just like stressful for me. So anyways, I left and I had started Nora's Guide to the Galaxy while I was at grad school. So I started that in fall of 2020 and I really enjoyed doing it. I kind of had this idea of like, I didn't think it was ever going to be like feasible to do Nora's Guide to the Galaxy full time, and it is not. I don't really make any money for doing this, but would help me build a portfolio so I could move into science communication. I did an internship as a science writing internship with the University of Chicago. Like I was definitely moving in that direction. I applied for some other science communication fellowships and stuff that I didn't get, although I think I got close a couple times. But so I knew that was the direction I wanted to move in, and I ended up finding this job that was like my absolute dream job, which is to do science communication for JPL for the exoplanet office. Anyway, that didn't work out, which I've talked about before. So I just was in LA with no job and a ton of debt. Well, not a ton of debt, but I had to pay JPL back my relocation bonus. And just like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And one thing that I decided to do was go back into actually doing science for my day job and then just do science communication on my own because I wasn't running Nora's Guide to Galaxy while I was doing SciComm as my day job and I really missed it. So that is why I'm still here making videos for you all, but it's also why I don't make very many videos because I work 40 hours a week and I commute 10 hours a week. So like I don't have a ton of free time. For my day job, I work at like a defense contractor and I do kind of, I would say applied physics. But I still get to do kind of science. So like, it's not the same as doing academic research in astrophysics by any means, but it is interesting and challenging. And I work with some really cool people and really smart people. And I have it pays the bills. And then also, just as a fun side note, so when I was a grad student, I went to my very first like big conference the summer after my first year. So that would have been 2018. It was a conference in England. It was Exoplanets 2. And while I was there, I had a friend who had done his PhD at the University of Geneva, who was from Australia. And he had all his friends from the University of Geneva that he saw when we got to this conference. And I remember I was watching him talk to all his friends, and I was like, one of his friends is like kind of cute. So I was like asking him, I was like, oh, who's your like cute friend? Now, he was like kind of a notorious gossip. So I really had this like pretty firm idea that even though I told him not to tell his friend that I said that, I kind of knew he was going to tell his friend that I said that. He like orchestrated that we went to lunch together. And so his friend was a postdoc at the University of Geneva and was also from Australia. And so we ended up, hanging out. We went on a date. It was a lot of fun. And I had planned this whole trip after the conference, because I had flown over to England for the conference, I might as well, take some vacation while I'm there. And so, like I said, this guy was at Geneva, and so he went back to Switzerland after the conference, and he invited me to come visit him there. And so I canceled all my travel plans. I was staying at a hostel in Paris when we made these plans, and I went down to the front desk and I was like, I'm going to cancel the rest of my stay because I'm going to see a boy that I met and he lives in Switzerland. And they were all cheering for me. They're like, this is so cute. It's like a rom-com. And I was like, I know. And so I left all my stuff, going to the train station to catch the train to Geneva. And I went to the wrong train station, so I missed my train. So I was sobbing in the train station because I'm like, okay, this guy's going to write me off. He's going to think I'm an idiot. I'm going to miss him. I had to stay in Paris another night. I had to go back to the hostel and be like, can I have that bed? Just one more night. But I ended up getting the train the next day. Anyway, we're married now. So as much as I love my PhD, my husband is definitely the best thing that came out of my time at UChicago. And of course, I kept my badge from that conference where I met my husband. Okay, now that is certainly enough about me. If you watched all of that, well, thank you, I guess. And now you know a lot about me. But that's who I am. That's Dr. Nora behind Nora's Guide to the Galaxy. And I hope you will stick around for some science videos. I have a really cool one coming up that I'm so excited to share with you guys. And yeah, have a good one. Cheers.